Hi, my name is Rebecca Cleary, and I'm going to be talking about the differences in the distributions of nutrition between households above and below poverty. And this work is with my co-authors, Yizao Liu from the Pennsylvania State University and Andy Carlson, who's right here. She's from the ERS. We have a disclaimer that we have to include because we have ERS co-author on the publication. Just that this doesn't represent the government's view, and it should not be attributable to IRI who provided the data. We know that there's an income gradient in health, and that there's also an income gradient in diet-related disease incidence. So, diet-related diseases like obesity, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, these face an income gradient where they are more prominent upon lower income populations and less prominent on higher income populations. There's an abundance of research that says, one of the reasons that this could be is because healthier diets are more expensive, but this is contended. So some authors suggest that a healthy diet can be affordable. And we know that even the diets of higher income households still need to be improved. And many studies that calculate cost of healthy diet, they do so on a per calorie basis. And this is not necessarily intuitive, right? If we're thinking about, getting calories from broccoli versus getting calories from a candy bar, and then which one's more expensive per calorie, right? That kind of seems like healthier things should be more expensive per calorie. There's a well-explored education gradient in health. So it could be linked, right? We could see this income gradient and diet-related disease incidence because there's an education gradient in health. And similarly, poverty is associated with other characteristics, other demographics. And these demographics could be associated with lower diet quality and are distributed disproportionately among the poor and disadvantaged populations.
You are telling me that you are not sharing your slides on Zoom. We forgot to share the screen, I think. Wait. And put it full screen.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Can they see them now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. We're looking, we're looking at the literature that's exploring differences in diet qualities. Why do we have differences in diet qualities between low and high income populations? If diet costs can't explain everything, what else is going on? There has been some literature in this area, some other investigations. It's almost exclusively done at the means. We found 2 exceptions where we look at the percentiles of diet quality scores for males versus females. Some people looking at more than just the mean across the entire distribution have found that diet quality for all groups has increased over time, although there's some evidence that low-income households may not have improved as much as higher income households. Both of these research projects use NHANES data, which is conducted at a similar time once a year and asks about food consumed in the previous 24 hours. It can possibly suffer from with in-person variation that occurs as diets can change substantially from day to day. Other studies that have looked at why these differences in diet qualities occur focus on consumption of micronutrients or specific food categories without considering a complete diet. So what we plan to do, or what we're looking at, is how different are the distributions of diet quality or nutrition, we're going to call it diet quality nutrition, for households above and below 130% of the poverty threshold. So we know that there's some difference in diet quality at the mean, right? That's been documented by the literature. Our question is, where do we see this difference across the entire distribution of nutrition or of diet quality, okay? And then what factors contribute to the difference in diet quality and nutrition across poverty status? So as we're looking at the distribution of diet quality and nutrition, we're asking, do different factors contribute to the difference in diet quality between low and high income populations at the low end of diet quality, where households are most at risk for diet-related diseases, than at the higher end of diet quality, where households are less at risk for diet-related diseases. Yeah, and we want to know, do those factors change across the distribution? Right, so we're taking a distributional approach to look at these differences in diet quality. Just a preview of our findings. At every point, we find that the distribution of diet quality and nutrition for households above poverty, so those higher income households, lies to the right of that below poverty. So this is consistent with first order stochastic domination or stochastic dominance. And first order stochastic dominance implies second order, right, which has welfare consequences. And we find that the gap, so that difference in diet quality nutrition is small for less healthy diet qualities. So at the low end of the distribution, where diet qualities are less healthy, we find that that gap between those below and above poverty is small. While at the end of at the higher end of the distribution, where diet qualities are healthier, that's where we see a larger gap. So these studies done at the mean, where they're capturing some kind of meaningful gap between the two populations, might be more reflective of households that are eating healthier than those that are more at risk for diet-related diseases. We also find that levels of education and employment explain most of the gap at the lower tail, and returns to occupation and age, along with the education level, explain most of the gap at the upper tail. So that's just a preview, and now I'll go through the data that we used, our methods, and then I'll go through a more detailed look at our results. So we're using IRI Consumer Network panel data. So this is these are the data where the households they go out, they buy whatever they're going to buy at the store, and then they come back and they use a handheld scanner and they scan in the UPC code of their purchases, right? And then IRI collects all these data, all these scans from these households, right? And the most reliable scanners go into what they call the static panel. So it's about 60,000 households a year that we have everything that they've scanned that they've brought into their house for food at home consumption. We have, for demographics, we have categories for education, race, occupation, ages and presence of children, marital status, and employment. And then for this study, we also include food at home expenditures. So because we have these data that shows not just what the UPCs of what they bought, it has product characteristics, including how much they spent. So we can understand what their food expenditure was, household size and age. So we take this data set and we partition the households into two groups based on poverty status. So those that are above 130% of the poverty threshold and those that are above and below. So we have above and below two groups. So we use 130% of the poverty threshold because that's what SNAP uses to determine, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. That's what they use to determine initial eligibility. So we figured that helps us stay policy relevant, speaking about a policy relevant population. And then we aggregate. So this is on the purchase occasion. These data, IRI, CMP, are at the purchase occasion level. So that means every time they go to the store, every time a household goes to the store and they come back with those purchases, they scan them in. That's an observation in the data set. So we're trying to look at diet quality, nutrition. Maybe one trip to the store is not so reflective of your overall quality of the at-home food environment. So we aggregate it to the monthly level. We figure that's probably more representative of what the household's taking in at a monthly level. We use the IRI CMP and we combine it with this new data set that the ERS has constructed, and Andy Carlson has led that effort. So this is called the Purchase to Plate Crosswalk, and it links UPCs to foods from the CMPP database. And then we're able to translate UPCs into grams of diet components, which are then converted to a measure of diet quality. We use HEI, and I'll talk a little bit about that, I think in the next slide, based on this algorithm that CMPP has constructed. and categories face minimum and maximum requirements. If you're familiar with the literature that uses scanner data and diet quality. Okay, thanks. All right, so just keep moving forward. If you're familiar with this, whatever, some people take a linear approach. Okay, so the diet quality nutrition is based on the purchases, not exactly on what goes into the mouths, gets consumed by the households. So that's just a limitation of the data. We use the Healthy Eating Index as a measure of diet quality. The Healthy Eating Index varies from 0 to 100. 100 is perfect adherence to the dietary guidelines for Americans. And then 0 is perfect not adherence. So that's the worst diet. So then we have an entire distribution of diet qualities. This shows you the cumulative distribution functions for households above poverty and below poverty. We also, so this visually you can see, right? You can see the stochastic dominance pretty visually, but we also run statistical tests. We run a Kaplan-Goebel test, and then we run the Kolmogorov-Smirnov test. And in both cases, we find evidence in favor of first order stochastic dominance. Other variables show differences between the two samples of the above and below poverty. We see slightly lower food at home expenditures per person for the above poverty group. Like we have $106 a month for the above poverty group versus $100 a month for the below poverty group. Less education below poverty, and you can see some other differences in the sample. So the question that we have, that we bring to the data is, are these differences in demographic characteristics that lower income households have versus higher income households, are they contributing to this gap that we're seeing in dietary quality, right? So that was how we started off talking about the literature. Okay. To address this, we use an unconditional quantile regression approach. We use unconditional quantile regression instead of conditional quantile regression because we don't want our results to be conditional upon the covariates or the level of the covariates. We want to understand what's going on unconditional in the distribution itself. So first we run UQRs on both populations, and then we make use of a relatively new decomposition technique. We call it Ffl decomposition. It's a type of Owaka blinder for quantiles. So if you're familiar with Owaka blinder decomposition, it's basically taking a difference that you get, right? And it's decomposed it into two parts, a difference between the data, right, the x's, and then a difference between the coefficients. So that would be the betas, and they're weighted by the betas and the data. Okay. Owaka blinder decomposition only works at the mean. So here we are, we're able to decompose the difference in dietary quality for our households above and below poverty into two components, right? We're able to do it for what's based on the level of the data, right? So differences in income, and then differences in the relationship of income with dietary quality. So the coefficient effect and the composition effect. So that's the Owaka blinder decomposition. It only works at the mean. What FFL do is they apply this to quantiles or any other statistic using recentered influence functions. So now we're able to take the same kind of idea where you're able to take a gap and you decompose it into what's the effect of the level of the data and what's the effect of the relationship of the data with the dependent variable, right? And you can apply it to any statistic in your data, and we do it at every quantile so that we can take every fifth quantile so that we can take a look at what's happening across the entire distribution. Okay. We do find that that quantile effects matter, right? So we reject OLS in favor of the quantile regression coefficients. We do find some type of, we do find that our confidence intervals for our unconditional quantile regression coefficients lie outside of the OLS. So we're able to see that we do have some type of quantile effect for education, occupation, marital status, food at home expenditures, age and household size. And for the households below poverty, also race, presence, and ages of children, and I indicated for Hispanic. I don't want to go too much into detail for the UQR results because we don't have a lot of time. So I'll just show you one, which is the, so this is the coefficient at each quantile. The blue line is the coefficient at each quantile for food at home expenditures. So that's the relationship of food at home expenditures with HEI, our measure of dietary quality. And you can see, and it's for households above poverty and below poverty. We run these two samples separately. And you can see that it has a small but definitely different effect than the OLS estimate, which is given as that dark black line. So UQR is our setup, but we need, if we want to investigate that gap and what contributes to that gap and how that's different across the distribution, we need to be using, the Ffl decomposition. So I'll move to those results next. Here's where you can see the aggregate decomposition, and we can also do a detailed decomposition based on using the recentered influence functions. This is one of our main results. What's very interesting about this, so you can see on the bottom, that gives us the quantile that we are at in HEI score. So the quantile of diet quality. So this is our measure of diet quality at the, so Q5, right? This is the 5th quantile of diet quality. This is the low end of diet quality. And then it goes all the way up to the 95th quantile. Okay, so that's high end of diet quality. Those are healthy diets. All right, so this blue line with the squares is telling us what the total difference in diet quality between the above and below poverty households is. So this is the difference. So we can see at the low end of diet quality, right? The 5th quantile, the 10th quantile, the 15th quantile, this is small, right? We're seeing like 1.5 points on a 100-point scale. Okay, so it's small at this lower end. It reaches its maximum. The difference is largest, right? It gets to be about 4 points around the 80th quantile, right? This is the high end of diet quality. These are healthier households, right? So when we're talking about differences in above and below poverty, right, and differences in diet quality, households that are most at risk for diet-related diseases and health consequences of a poor diet, they exist at that low end of the distribution, right? And here we're not seeing such a great difference in their diet qualities. We're seeing a bigger difference, which is going to influence the mean that most people are going to capture at the high end of diet quality. And then these are our detailed decomposition. So this just tells us the contribution of each category of variables to the overall gap. You can see education really matters, but it matters less at the low end of diet quality and more for higher quality diets. And then the structural effect, we have variables that are all over the place. Okay. Here we can see the effect of this light blue line is the food at home expenditures per person, right? And here we see that the influence of food at home expenditures per person, it does not explain, we do not see it explaining very much of the gap between high income households and low income households, or the above and below poverty households diet quality, right? So that light blue line is small in comparison to, say, that orange line, which is education. So we have the endowments of characteristics. So the data explained about 67% of the gap in the tails and about 54% of the gap in the middle. So if we were just to run a walk-up blinder decomposition, we find that it explains only about 54% of the gap. But these endowments actually, we have the, so the endowments explain more of the tails than the middle. Just to summarize, we find a small gap at the low end of diet quality where diets are most at risk, where households are most at risk for diet-related diseases, and a much bigger gap at the higher end of diet quality. And we find that different factors contribute to this gap across the distribution. That's it.
How would you explain the structural effect of the food at home expenditure to be small and positive for most compiles, but then the 80th and above
So this is the difference. So it's the difference of the above poverty minus the below poverty. Okay, so and yeah, we get a different value at the 90th and 95th quantiles. We see it really drop off there. It may be that our results are less reliable at the tails because this decomposition method is less reliable at like the 95th quantile and above. So we're aware of that. That could be it. We did want to share what's happening across the entire distribution what we're capturing.
Thank you, Rebecca. Next, we will have the
Mhm.
don't stop sharing, just close the presentation.
Yeah, so I need to, okay, yeah. My presentation. Here. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for being here because this is the last session. I was really worried about being just 4 here, the person that want to present, but I see that we also have some other probably family around, relatives. So thank you, mom, dad, brother. No, okay. I am from Chile, just in case people notice accent. Yes, it's a Chilean accent. Okay, and I am talking about the thing that we'll be talking about. I am sharing figures about Chile, but you will see the figures and you will see that they are not just about Chile. There are things that happen in other places. Yes. And what is the point of this research? I will just concentrate. We want to know, we want to try to explain, to analyze, okay, what is the reason because of the food insecurity gap that there are between the household that are headed by men and the household which are headed by women. Yes. For the people that is here in the room that doesn't know what mean food security means when we have a household that have all the possibilities to have all the food in terms of quantity and quality that help them to have a healthy diet. Yes. How we can do that? How we can measure this experience? Okay, we can measure this experience. Basically, one of the most appropriate or one of the most used way is using a questionnaire done by FAO that have 8 questions. Those 8 questions go from the softer to the harder. What is the softer? Ask, have you be worried that you don't have enough food? Okay, which is the softer? Okay, we can call it softer, but it's not soft. Okay, because even have a household that say yes to that means really something. Personally, I think that. But what is the hardest one? The hardest one is say, well, have you not been eating during the whole day? Okay, which are, well, and what happened in Chile? And I'm using a figure that is actually is a figure that was done by the minister, and I keep it in Spanish a little bit to show how things are done in Chile. Okay, in the figure, so I just like to concentrate in the blue bar. In the blue bar, say that 10.8% of the household that the head is a man, okay, have food insecurity, while 16.3% of the household that the head is a female, is a woman, have food insecurity. Okay, so just I like to keep those numbers. Okay, and what in our talk, what is the most important thing I'm planning to talk? That the difference is 5.2%. So here we are concentrating more in the difference than in the current level. Yeah. So we want to explain and say, well, why happened that difference? Yes. Very quickly, talking about what the previous research said about it, just to give a brief, some brief word that say that in general, women tend to eat healthier, okay, or tend to be more careful about the food that they purchase than we as a man, okay? And even that, also, they tend to have better cooking skills that we have. So thinking about this, well, we should be probably thinking, well, but how is the case that the household headed by women, they have a higher food insecurity? Okay. And also, different way that hasn't been done much about this topic, they say, well, what happened with the social skill, with the social ties, okay? Social ties show that the household that have the strong social ties tend to be less food insecure than those household that doesn't have social ties, yes? Now, what is the first, and I have been hearing this in many meetings, many ways. People give an answer, very quickly answer. Well, that is obviously because the household that headed by men have a higher income, or tend to have a higher income, or should have a higher income. So with that higher income, it is expected that they have lower food insecurity. Other people say, well, and also link it, could be, well, because the men in general have larger number of years of study in school, so that also may explain higher income and explain the lower food insecurity for men-headed households. Okay, I was curious about it. Well, is that really true? Is that really be able to explain this 4.2%? Yeah, and I am using a data set. A data is a large data set, probably one of the largest one that is used for the state for many help that is done to the low-income household. Okay, and that also recently includes that questionnaire that I show you from FAO. So we were able to use that questionnaire and do all our econometrics analysis, okay, with all the variables that are part of that data set. We are talking about something about 70,000 households. Yeah, and if we use the weight, representative weight, we are talking about something close to 6,000 million households. What we found, first, income, talking about income to the people who are able to see, I think that is possible to see with those numbers. We finally saw the thing that we were expecting. Men-headed, which are the two main columns, are to the center columns, the first columns, men-headed household have a higher income than women-headed household, okay? That is true. Also education, talking about the education, men-headed household have a higher education, but little bit. It's not such a big, it's not a big difference. Now someone can argue that maybe they have similar years, but they have been studying different subjects. Okay, and so there are certain subjects which are better paid than other subjects, other disciplines. Yes. Okay, I am not covering here that part, but it's also possible. Yeah. And here you can see in the last line, in the almost the last line, the last before line, we found that 0.11 and the 0.16 which show us our 5% difference between genders. Now, talking about all the other variables, I started comparing them, and clearly the variable that showed the highest difference is the marital status one. What mean with this? 79% of the household headed by men, they are living in couple, while 27% of the household headed by women, they are not living. Sorry, they are living in couples. What mean? One is 79% and the other one is 27%. And that was the variable that I was interested, because that actually shows something very different. Yes. Now, also working with the data. To say, well, I like to compare, I like to create different subsamples and try to see what happened with the percentage of people under food insecurity, which is, here you have the different subsamples. In the fifth line, sorry that I cannot move here. Yeah, but, well, I can use this. Yeah, you can, no, you cannot see the thing. Yeah, I will go there. People will take you the line, but here we are talking about in the case of one member household. So when it's just it's a single person living there, we are not seeing difference, which is very interesting. Why? Because finally, we just have difference, that gender gap. It is possible to see it when we are talking about the families, households, about multiple people living in the household. But when they are just a single person, we don't see that. So that was something interesting, personally, finding in the article. Yeah. Now, something that make that 5% going further, and when the household have children. Yeah, children is key from that point of view. Yeah. And also when the household have low income. So the low income household are being hit when they have children, more than the high income ones. Now, the following step will say, well, let's work with a product and let's see what happened with the marginal effect. And what I found with the product here, product marginal effect, first I say, well, I will work with the full sample, okay? Just controlling for what is the gender of the household head. I have my 0.52, which is the 5.2% difference that is associated with the gender, which was nice because I'm showing the same. I find a similar number. Yeah. After that, when I control for the composition of the household, meaning what is the number of adults, number of children, number of seniors, yeah, that 5.2% goes to 4.4%. Yeah. And when I control it for zone, urban, or when it's not urban, and what is the age of the household head, doesn't make change, just talking about that gap. I'm working with the gap, not with the level. Thank you. Yes. Now, I say, well, now I'm planning to work with the subsamples. Let's have a subsample with just the one member household and the multi-member household. Yeah. And what I find there, that our gap is also disappearing, or even I have a I have a negative number, minus 1.7%. That means that the gap goes to the other way. Yes. Now, taking this into account, I say, well, now I like to work with the marital status variable. Yes. And I work with the mediation analysis. Yeah. What helped me? That what the mediation analysis show me? There are two possible paths here. Say, one, it is the path that the household head gender, okay, is associated with an effect food security, okay, or that which is the first path. We call it the direct path, or we can have an indirect path that goes through another variable. Yes. And I have three possibilities, three alternative possibilities here. Or maybe go through household head education. So meaning that because I have certain gender that is associated with it, have different education level, and that also impacts food insecurity. Or maybe it is linked with household income, or maybe it's linked with marital status. Yeah, so I have those two different paths. And what I'm finding here is for our first model, when we measure about education, we use education of the household head. The percentage here we have the total effect is 4.7%. The direct effect is 4.6%, and the effect that goes through the indirect path is 1%, which corresponds finally that from the total effect, 1.7% goes through the mediation part. Yes. If I do the same procedure with income, I'm getting 12.8%. So, which is larger, but it doesn't explain a large amount of the total effect. And finally, when I use marital status, having a partner, I have little more than half of the total effect goes through the marital status variable. And finally, this is the last table that I have. I say, well, now working just with the marital status variable, I say, now let's try to compare two different samples. For instance, when the house have a car that doesn't have a car, but it's not just having a car, is what is the question exactly? Say, do you have someone that you can ask a car in case you have an emergency? So if you have an emergency at home and you really need a car, do you have someone that you can ask a car? Yeah, and in that particular case, we have like 82% of the total effect is mediated by marital status. So marital status is even more important. It is more relevant for those households that doesn't have anyone to ask for a car in case of an emergency. And this is my last slide, so perfect time, thank you. So we have that for when we have household with a single person, okay, we have that women, okay, the food insecurity, it is not different. It's not basically different between men and women, but that difference, it is clear. It's appear when we have multi-member households. Yes. And finally, that one of the things that I plan to keep working on that marital status, having a partners, play a key role in order to have food security at the household. Thank you.
I feel like your marital status variable is a little bit messy.
Mhm.
Because, okay, or the, and the male female head, because does your survey allow for a joint head or did they have to pick one?
So my survey,
Did the survey allow them to be a joint head or did they just have to pick one? Pick one head. How is the household head determined?
okay, the survey asked who is the household head, okay, and what is your contact, what is how you are related with the household head, yeah, and they say, well, they have several alternatives. You are married, you are with a partner, which are not married, and so on. So from all those, I say, well, if you are married or you are living with a partner, I call it partner.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is, they can't, if a man and a woman actually make decisions together and they believe that they are joint heads,
Mhm.
there's no box for that, correct? They can vote about it. The answer be, we're both that together.
No, there is not an answer. There is not a choice that say both of us we are the head. Now in Chile, there is something that, well, I am not proud of this. I'm not saying that it's good, okay? But in general, when it's living a man and a woman, the people tend to say that the man is the head. Yeah, and when there is no man, then is the woman the head. Yeah, but there are not possibility, and it's a very nice question. Yeah, when we can say when both were the head. No, there is no possibility.
So I hope in getting the situation with a couple, a married couple, but we heard that the woman is the because you just said that in most married couple, right, the man considers he's the head.
Yeah.
So in which context do you have the woman defending herself?
If you have a woman, if you have a, sorry, what? Okay. So you're saying, what is the case? When could be the case that you have a woman saying that she's the head and she also is married with someone?
Yes.
Oh yeah. It's, well, there are cases because we have 27% of people. So yeah, you're right. We have 20% of people that say that the woman is the head and the man is living. She has a partner, but she is not the head. But he is not the head.
Would that be insecure?
I don't think that for 27%. Yeah, it should be legally.
Maybe some of them.
It could be.
Is it legal? Things like marriage
Yeah.
people into it?
Yeah. It is possible. Yeah, and now people are really more open to say it. Okay, because in the past was the more censored. Yeah. Good.
I'll have to cut here. Sorry about it. Thank you.
Yeah, please.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming. So my presentation today is about how to, my presentation today is comparing how immigrants use time and money to produce food and managing their household food insecurity relative to natives. And this is a joint, I'm Siwen Zhou from Colorado State University, and this is the joint work with Dr. Berlin, Dr. Bonanno, and Dr. Behan. Okay, let's start with the motivation. So as we know that food insecurity occurs when the household they lack consistent access to the enough food for an active and healthy life, so which are associated with an increased risk of the adverse health outcomes and health disparities. However, immigrants are at higher risk of household food insecurity. So from this figure, we have made using the data from current population food insecurity questions. So we could find it's obviously that immigrants constantly have higher food insecurity rates than natives, especially for immigrant non-citizens who are eligible to use less benefits than the immigrant citizens. So it's very important for us to identify the limitations of resources for immigrants to maintain their food insecurity. So a series of household production function literature has demonstrated that both time and money are essential constituents for food security. So in the Baker in 1965 is first time to introduce the value of time in household production. And Bakery in later notes that so only accounts for the money difference, not for time differences, may be biased against the time per household. And Davian used in 2011 further confirmed that failing to account for the time required to produce food can severely distort estimates of the actual need of the households. And they in 2013 indicate that time and money are per substitute in household production. However, immigrant households may be more temper and money temper. So since many immigrants do not have access to food assistance or are hesitant to acquire the food assistance, so they are expected to be more reliant on their own money and time. So when immigrants, article in 2016 also argue that when immigrant to new places, so culturally difference can make immigrants more harder to find adequate nutrition. So there are other literature evidence shows that immigrants are more temper because they earn about 20% less than US-born workers, and they experience much higher poverty rates. And they also much temper in food production because they are more likely to work unusual hours, and they accept physically adverse and risk jobs. So in this paper, we aim to compare how immigrants managing their use time and expenditure to produce food and managing their household food insecurity relative to natives. So we will make two contributions. The first one is we will advance the literature on the determinants of food insecurity by evaluating both time and money invested in food production. And the second one is we will evaluate the different food security challenges faced by immigrants and natives by comparing their the returns to their food time and expenditure investments. So our empirical strategy is rooted in the general household mean production model. So where the first equation, Y is just the meal output and X is the inputs in the meal production, and C is a vector of technology shiftable variables. So since the time and money inputs, so maybe in some threshold, so then this household could be food insecure or food insecure. So we just using this very simple household insecurity production. Now the Y variable is just the food insecurity status for this household. So, and using the food production time and money as input and control for the household characteristics. And we just assume it is a linear production function, and we can get the marginal productivity of time and the marginal productivity of money on household food insecurity. And since we would like to compare the difference between immigrant and natives, so we will add the interaction terms for the time and money with the immigrant status. So this is our benchmark regressions. The Y variable is just a binary food insecurity state of variables for household age in state S and year T. And the T is household weekly total food production hours, and M is the household weekly food expenditure values in dollars. And I'm identify the immigrant citizens and the non-citizens separately with natives as our base groups. And X is just the control variables for household level and the individual level demographic variables. And we also control for state and year fixed effect to observe the time and the spatial invariant and observe the variables. So we can, after run this 0-1 probability model, so we could get the marginal productivity of time for different groups. So beta 1 represents for natives, beta 2 is for immigrant non-citizen, and beta 3 is for immigrant citizens, and similar for the expenditure, so represented by gammas. So even we control for the even we add the fixed effect for state and time. However, there are still some primary endogenous concerns in our regressions. So firstly, it is the time and expenditure. They are very with the household demographic compositions. So some literatures also call it is like the time and expenditure are endogenous to the household demographic compositions. For example, the old people, they will invest more time in their food production, and the higher education level household, they will invest more money in their home production. And the second one, the state specific economic conditions or unobserved shocks, it will be related both to the Y variable, our food insecurity, and also our X variable, the food time and money. So the third one is the reverse causality. It means that households that experience food insecurity, so they may select different investment in food production and the food expenditures. So our main idea to solve these concerns is to construct a new Bartik-like instrument. So simply speaking, it is like use the group level values of the time and expenditure to explain the household level values. So we construct the IVs, these IVs for time and expenditure separately by calculating the aggregate, the cell level food expenditure, food production time, and this is the aggregate level, other time use and the food expenditure at the national level. And the unique cells are constructed based on the demographic characteristics correlated with time and money to control for the sorting demographic characteristics. Then our estimation will be just very within these cells, not across these cells, or very across the demographic characteristics. So this will be solve our first concerns. And the second one, we constructed at the national level values. It can help us avoid the correlations with the state trained factors. So this is our specific IVs for food production time. So we use a 3 years moving average value of the other time used for specific age cohort and marriage status. So we also for this one we also try to maybe in the cells we put other characteristics, but it doesn't work well, and only so maybe because from a lot of literature sites the food production time will varies across the age cohort. And the IVs for food production expenditure is a 3 years mean value of food expenditures by age, education, race, marriage groups. We indicate by state. Yeah, and we also add the age, education level, and race fixed effect to control for any national age cohort, different education attainment, and race-specific shocks that could impact food insecurity status. So now let's take a look at our data. So we use an integrated data pairing the household from the CPS food insecurity supplement and the time use data. And so for our weekly food expenditure data, it's just from the current population food insecurity supplement from 2003 to 2018. So this just this finger just shows the mean food expenditures across the different household. The first part is for the natives. And the second part is for immigrant non-citizens, and the last part is for immigrant citizens. So then we divided this household into the single or married, and FIs represent it is food security, and FI is food insecurity. So I think in overall we find so food insecurity, no matter it's natives or immigrants, so food secure household invest more money in their food production than food insecurity household. And when we comparing across the immigrant status, so we also find, so let's say the single household, for each part of the first two, so we can find no matter it is immigrant non-citizen or immigrant citizen, so they have more money expenditure than natives. So this looks like a little bit different than our literatures. And also for married household is also immigrant consumes, immigrant invest more money in their food production. But I think this is consistent with the Atkins paper, because the immigrant, when they migrate to new places, so it's hard for them to get their cultural food. So they need to put more money there to get their cultural food.
A clarifying question. I might have missed this, but is this the mean in the household or per person?
A mean household, yeah. So the CPS data also only have the household level data. So they don't have the data for per person.
These are the household size, right?
Yeah. But this way is just for all the household. Yeah. So for the time use data, we use the data from the American time use data. However, this data only have the data for 24-hour dairy activities and only for the single person in this household. So we just imputed the data for other 6 days in this week, and we also imputed the data for the spouse in this household if it is a married person. So let's take a look at the mean food production time. So this time is by hour, unit is hour. So also, no matter it is natives and immigrant, food insecurity household, they invest more time than food insecure household. And also we can find if we no matter we say only single household or married household, we also could find immigrant, they spend more time in their food production. So maybe this is also because they need more times to prepare food preparation and travel for food for their food preparation, because they want to keep their traditional eating habits. So I forgot to mention is that the last part for our food production time, we have these activities included. So it's a food preparation, travel related food preparation, eating, travel related eating, drinking, and grocery shopping and non-grocery shopping time. So this is all the controls we have now. So children under 18 or not, and metro or not, household size, households tenure in the residence, and gender for height, age for height, education for height, and employment status, years of immigration, and race for height. And the interesting one for this is for education for height, we can find for immigrant, they have the much higher high education levels than natives, and also they have large size household size. So now let's take a look at our results. So we separate the random models for single household and married household because we from this time description figures, so we find so single and married, they have the large difference in time use. So for single household, so the first 3 columns is for our ORS, and the last 4 columns is for our 2-stage least square regression. So we have average for time and money. And the last part is our F statistics for the each interactive variable, so we can find our F statistics very high. So from statistically, our IV is a good IV. And now let's also let's compare the result of the OLS and the IVs. So we can find after control for some endogenous issues. So our coefficient have become larger. Yeah. And let's only focus on the last column result. So for the marginal effect of the time of the food time, we can find that the more time input could not increase the could decrease the food probability for food insecurity probability for native, but not for citizen and non-citizens. However, they have statistical difference. The green box means it is significant at compared to natives. It's a statistical difference at 10% level, and the red box means it's statistically significant at 5% level. And for food expenditures, we can find for single household, no matter it's natives, immigrant, or immigrant, so more time input could help them decrease their food insecurity, but there is no difference between the different groups. And for married household, so yeah, now let's just focusing on the last column. So we found for the marginal effect of time, so only more time input could decrease the marginal effect for could decrease the food insecurity probability for natives, but not for immigrant citizens. And however, when we just test the different marginal effect, we can find more. There is difference between immigrant citizens and natives. So it's a little bit similar like the single household. We are thinking maybe because the opportunity cost is different for immigrant and natives, because immigrant, they have the higher level population, higher level education level. So maybe they just so maybe food production time it have a higher opportunity cost. But for food expenditure, so there is almost more time input cannot decrease their food insecurity. Okay, let's the last one. So conclusions. So now we employ a IV approach to control for the endogenous of time and expenditure endogenous problems, and we found that immigrant and native households have different directions of marginal effect of time input in food production. And so more time input for natives could help them decrease their food insecurity, but not for immigrant household. Probability because they face different opportunity costs, which may affect their ability to managing food insecurity. So the second one is single households food insecurity status may benefit from the more money, but married household may benefit from more time. So I think we think from this results may give us some policy implications is that maybe for the values of time and money in the food assistance program. So this could suggest a benefit from a more flexible in food assistance program. For example, the SNAP, they provided the EBD card. So maybe it only can purchase some food in this specific supermarket. But for immigrants, maybe they cannot buy the food like their cultural food in like the cultural supermarket. For me, like Chinese people, we want to buy some food in the maybe the Asian market. So maybe next step, the food assistance program could provide money rather than only EBD card, and or allow the SNAP expenditures for ready to eat meals. So it could help them to save their money input. So this morning I just hear a food assistance program is like the meal kit. So I think that one maybe could help them to save their time input in production. Okay, thank you.
I'll just follow up on my clarification question, which is about household size.
Okay.
You're talking a lot about single and married households, but the whole time I'm sitting here wondering if it just is a function of household size or whether it's a function of being single or married, right? So
yeah.
Knowing how many kids are in the household, how many people in the household, I think in some of those earlier graphs would be much more informative, or maybe they're not, and that's informative in itself. But I think that could be what's at play, and some of those graphs would, be much more interesting. I think if you divided by the number of people in the household, ideally by the number of adults and children or something like that. And I know in your final slides you do account for that, but in the descriptives it could be helpful.
Okay, yeah, thanks for your questions. Yeah, so actually in the previously I also make divided the household into the whether, for example, the single household with children and so without children and or how many children, but because the sample size limitations, so now I just put the single and the different food insecurity status. Yeah, and I remember when divided the household by the different by the household size, it don't have so much difference.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, and last but not least myself, so I thank you for bearing with me until the very end of the conference. Congratulations. Well, I'm Alexis Villasis. I'm an assistant professor at Arizona State University. I will be presenting on the role of recall periods when predicting food insecurity, a machine learning application in Nigeria. This is current work with Syed Badrudosa, who is among you this fine afternoon. He's at Texas Tech. And also with Ashok Mishra and Joaquin Mayorga, who are at Arizona State as well. So I would like to start motivating this presentation with a little bit of context about food security in Nigeria. For those of you who might not be really familiar with the region, Nigeria is the largest country in terms of population in the sub-Saharan Africa region. And before the pandemic, it was estimated that around 40% or around 80 million people of Nigerians live below the international poverty line. Around 65 million Nigerians had consumption levels between $1.9 and $3.2 per day, per person per day, which gives you a hint of how the food security situation is around there. And the country has been marked during the last 2 decades with a high global hunger index, low food consumption score, and high calorie deficiency. So the situation is not really the best over there. And this gives you a glimpse of how food security situation is in Nigeria. And according to the last projections to the World Bank, 20% or more additional people will be thrown out into the poverty line because of the pandemic. So they are still making those calculations, so the situation is not improving at all. So this, of course, the situation of food insecurity around the population, I mean, it's not new. We have been leading efforts all over the world to try to combat food insecurity. So, food assistance programs led by international agencies or by local government, they need tools, right? So they need tools to develop and improve relief in development programming. And these food assistance programs or interventions, they need effectiveness. And the effectiveness of this, or whatever type of intervention is that is designed to address food insecurity, critically depends on 2 things. First, on the accurate classification of food insecurity among households and also on targeting efforts, and also on rigorous monitoring, evaluation, and early warning systems, because at the end of the day, we want to be able to predict, okay, if there's going to be a food insecurity situation or a famine, we would like to step ahead, and be able to predict with some time in advance what would be the zones or the regions or the municipalities where we would like to, focus our efforts. So this is where machine learning comes in so nicely in helping, the efforts with food security around the world. And it's come like handy because the recent developments of machine learning have improved household level classification and prediction accuracy, basically forecasting where we're going to experience food insecurity. But at the same time, machine learning methods have reduced exclusion and inclusion errors in program targeting. Those machine learning has been shown to outperform conventional estimation methods to predict that have been predicting food insecurity. So most of the literature that is out there using machine learning to try to predict food insecurity focus mostly on the food consumption score. I already mentioned, I think a couple presentations mentioned it, but for those of you who are not familiar, the food consumption score represents the household dietary diversity and nutrient intake and help categorize households as having poor, borderline, or acceptable food condition. But basically, people is asked, okay, how much or how many vegetables, how much fruit or how much protein you have eaten in a certain period, right? Most likely during the last 7 days. So basically, how much fruit you have consumed during the last 7 days, how much protein you have consumed during the last 7 days, and then you construct these indexes, and then you can, try to get a general picture, a broad picture of the food security at the household level. So, of course, food consumption score is just one of them, but we have other indexes like Andres mentioned, the food insecurity experience scale or the household hunger scale, or there are many methodologies that are being developing right now as we speak. So the thing about all these indexes and methodologies is that they tend to use different recall periods. For example, the FIS that I think Andres presented to us use a 12-month recall period, but there are some applications that use the same index using only a 30-day recall period, right? The food consumption score, as I mentioned before, uses a 7-day recall period. So this naturally raises the question of whether the use of different recall periods influence the classification and accuracy of prediction of food insecure households, right? So again, we have many different indexes. They use different recall periods. So what are we doing when we're predicting, right? So what we do in this research, we apply machine learning methods to examine the implications of using different recall periods when predicting food insecurity measures. So to do this, we use 4 weights of the LSMS ISA datasets that the World Bank collects and publishes. We use them because, well, they are available to anyone, and also because they are geo-referenced, and we are able to merge this household level data set with weather data from NASA, from CHIRPS. So at the end, we construct a really nice data set where we do not only have household-specific socioeconomic conditions, but also agricultural conditions, climatic information, and then we can apply machine learning and search over variables and hyperparameters for our prediction exercises. So what we do in our research is we investigate 2 specific measures of household food insecurity, nutrition-based and experience-based. So for nutrition-based measures, we use the food consumption score that I already mentioned before, but we also explore experience-based measures. And this presentation, I will mostly focus on the experience-based measures of food insecurity. We have 4 indicators here that I have specified here at the bottom. Basically, people are asked whether they have relied on less preferred foods, or if they have limited the variety of food eaten, or if they have limited the portion size at meal times, or if they have if they have reduced the number of meals eaten in a day. So those experience-based measures, yeah, they are very broadly, they capture the diversity of diets, food shortage, other aspects of food insecurity, but also somehow they are able to capture the psychological toll of food insecurity at the same time, because it's experience-based, all right? So one of the things about these experience-based measures is that they are popular because it's really cheap to collect them. I mean, instead of measuring specific amounts of vegetables or protein that people have eaten, these are yes, no questions. So they are really easy to collect. These, of course, have implications in data collection because they reduce time. And also because they are really easy to interpret. Specifically, of course, we like complicated things in economics, but policymakers really like, really simple things, right? So telling a policymaker that, a household has a food consumption score of 30 and he is borderline, that might be a little confusing. So these are popular among policymakers because yes, no, and are really clear and easy to interpret. So we exploit differences in recall periods because the World Bank, they work in conjunction with the Statistical Office of the Nigerian government. And for some reason, well, actually because they wanted to try to standardize the methodology with the FIS of 30 days. So they changed the recall periods when they were collecting experience-based food security indicators. During the first 3 waves of the LSMS ISA, they used a recall period of 7 days to measure these experience-based indicators. But for the last data set, they changed the recall period, and now they use a 30-day recall period to measure these indicators, which is kind of a nice opportunity because, I mean, it's not exactly a natural experiment, but we can exploit this variation to explore the role of recall periods when predicting food insecurity. So again, this allows us to examine if predictions of experience-based food security indicators are consistent across different recall periods. So in other words, these change in recall periods let us explore the extent to which a predictive model developed to capture short-term food insecurity, we call it short-term because it's only 7 days, that was measured in the first 3 waves of data set, can identify food insecurity in longer terms. In that case, for the last data wave, that was, they used a 30-day recall period. So we predict, this is an exercise where we predict food security indicators. So we train and validate a battery of different machine learning models, including boosted logic. We use random forest, EXtreme, gradient boosting, and artificial neural networks for our exercise. And we perform our analysis at the household level and compare the accuracy of all these models when predicting different measures of household food security in Nigeria. So what did we find? Well, we find that we have a highly accuracy when predicting this type of food security indicators. It varies between 78% to 90% when the recall period is held constant. So when I mean it's held constant is when we only use the data that uses 7-day recall period. That is the first 3 data sets. But when we use these models that have been trained with 7-day recall period to try to predict on the last data set that use a 30-day recall period, we found that I'm thinking I'm just being the next slide, but we found that the accuracy decreases a little, but it's still training models with a 7-day recall period let us identify 7 out of 10 households that are food insecure based on a 30-day recall period. So the implication of all this exercise is that even though a 7-day recall period could be considered a very short term of food insecurity, maybe not be ideal for targeting assistance, program assistance programs. Its use is still helpful for predictive food insecurity in longer terms, in specific case 30 days, especially when there is data limitations, which is always the case in developing countries where we have always changes in the data methodologies of data limitations, right? So our main contributions is that, well, we try to highlight the predictive power of machine learning methods to predict food security, and the results presented here contribute to this targeting exercise used by international agencies and governments. And well, also these have implications for survey developers and enumerators, because at least we provide some evidence that these changing recall periods, they do play a role, but still when we try to use machine learning to identify food security, they still serve. I mean, in this specific case of Nigeria, the data that we have, we see that a 7-day recall period still can predict a 30-day recall period for insecurity measure. So this is not a new thing that we're doing. People have been doing these machine learning exercises for the last 5-6 years and trying to predict food insecurity around the world. But what I wanted to highlight here is that all of these studies uses cross-sectional data, basically only 1 year of data, with the exception of this one. Su et al. 2021, he used panel data, which is what we also use in our studies. So that, highlights, the importance of using, panel data to try to create more robust models that can somehow capture, some dynamics. In our specific case, our data set spans the period from 2010 until 2018. There were a lot of things that happened in Nigeria during those years, like, for example, presidential elections. There were major floods in 2012. Of course, every now and then we have those reports from Boko Haram and how they also influence food security. So those dynamics implicitly are captured by the use of panel data when predicting food security. So I'm just trying to go really quick because I'm running out of time, but here is just some summary statistics of the data that we have. And what I wanted to highlight here is that, well, here we have the 4 indicators, the experience-based indicators that we're investigating. And I just wanted to highlight here that, the situation is not getting better, right? For example, here, this second indicator, this is just the mean of the household that reported having, for example, they limited the variety of food eaten. For example, 15% in 2010 and 2018 was 42% of them. So the situation is getting worse, right? I think for all of them, it's pretty consistent, except for the first one, where we saw a little decrease from 36% on relied on less preferred foods on 2015 to 32% on 2018, which is still high, right? But pretty much it's pretty consistent across all indicators. The food security situation is getting worse over time. I tried to fit this map here, but I just wanted to give you an idea that we have a national representative sample. And in the fourth column, again, I just want to bring to your attention that this year they changed the recall period and they measure these indicators using a 30-day recall period versus in the first 3 waves of data, they use a 7-day recall period to measure food security. Here are just some results of our exercise. I'm going to present 2 slides showing this really quick. But basically what I wanted to show here is that first, in this first exercise, we use the data set from the first 3 waves. And remember, the first 3 waves have the same recall period, 7 days. So from those 3 data waves, we train and validate our machine learning models on 80% of the sample, and then we predict on the 20% that was held out, all right? So what we find here in simple words is that when the recall period is held constant, we can achieve really high accuracy levels of prediction that vary between 77% to 90 or 91%. So machine learning, again, comes very handy and nicely to help with these exercises of food security prediction for targeting and developing programming. But in this second exercise that we conduct here, what we do is something different. We train our machine learning models using the full data from the first 3 data sets, which has the same recall period. We train and validate our model, and then using those trained and validated models, we try to predict the data that we have on the last wave, which is the wave that used the 30-day recall period, and see if it's consistent or not, if there are some changes, because most likely, of course, we cannot claim causality, but we can attribute any changes to the change in recall period that happened for the interviews, right? So what we found here, of course, the accuracy of prediction decreases a little, but still, it ranges from, for example, 68% to 77% and so forth, right? So it's around 65, 70% of accuracy, which is still pretty high. I mean, when we compare our results with the studies that I showed you before, all of them have an accuracy of 50, 60%. And I mean, we can probably attribute this to the use of panel data because that gives us a richer set of estimations. And also because I'm not showing the model here, but we include a bunch of variables, not only at the household level on agricultural production, but also on weather variables here. So just some discussion before we finish the presentation. We use these machine learning models that have been trained and validated using this short recall period. And using them, we show that one can obtain several inferences. The first one is that if the recall period is held constant, you can still, identify 8 out of 10 households that are food insecure. But if you change the recall period, in this case for a longer recall period, 30 days, the models will still work and still can detect around 7 out of 10 households that are food insecure based on a longer recall period. So the implied mechanism when we were trying and discussing this is that the 30-day recall period, of course, is a longer period, is better at weeding out, food secure households from the picture, right? So mainly we base our assessment on experience-based measures of food security, but this also signals the importance of recall periods for accurate classification of households and reducing exclusion and inclusion errors in program and targeting. So another thing that we found interesting when conducting this exercise is that our models that have been trained using the short recall period, 7 days, have a higher true positive rate when detecting a 30-day recall period. Basically, when we have these models training for a short recall period of food security, help us identify more true positives, in this case, of a data set that has a longer recall period, right? So here we have a sensitivity of 93% versus 88%. So it's a little more accurate. But at the same time, these models have a lower true negative rate when predicting the same thing, the 30-day recall period. So, there are some trade-offs, but from a food security perspective, it's not bad at all because failing to identify household as food secure is better than misclassifying a household as food secure. Okay, so from initiatives to try to help, you know, people with food assistance programs, it's better that the error is on the safe side rather than on the wrong side, right? And also, well, our model simplifies the use of oversampling and weighting techniques needed to correct for these issues. And as suggested by the paper from Sue and 2021, still we need further data, right, to try to estimate what are the true costs of misclassification in all these efforts that are led by governments and by international agencies. Because I mean, there is still a lot of work to do on how to be more efficient and cost effective with this type of interventions when we want to mitigate food insecurity. So well, I'm just gonna start the presentation there because we're running out of time. I don't know if we have questions. Pretty open to discuss anything.
Miscategorization of households. So let's say that, I mean, because of the nature of those models, we don't really, I mean, it's hard to present which variable contributed in which percentage to the prediction. That you have a common variable.
Yeah.
And so my point is, I mean, that 70% accuracy is the 30%. It's not there. So is there any systematic, what I'm saying, that you exclude systematic specific household just because when you use your algorithm, some of the variables that are in there,
right,
you will capture some of the households that are 30%.
I don't think we accomplish. It's a really good comment. I think we didn't think about that, but we conducted a bunch of robustness tests, and I didn't explain this in the presentation because of time limits. But we also estimate and predict the food consumption score over the 4 waves. Why we did this? Because that one had the recall period constant all over. So what our first take was that, okay, if there is any systematic change in the prediction of the food consumption score in the very last data wave, then there must be something structural that we are not accounting for that. But when we were predicting the food security, food consumption score, results were pretty much the same for the last wave. So we rolled out that there was something different in the last wave of data that, you know, might be causing our change in the accuracy that we show in the experience base. But we didn't consider the 30%, you know, error or, you know, our
I think that, I mean, I understand what you did.
Yeah.
I think it's like the apples with orange flavored apples comparison.
Yeah.
So they're very similar, but you're saying because we predicted one measure that was the same in the last wave, and that's very good prediction, very accurate.
It stayed the same, yeah.
But that's not, I mean,
No, it's not the same. It's not the same, but it's our benchmark, because otherwise we don't have any other way to say, okay, it could be, I don't know, a new conflict.
The 2 ways you can predict the 7 days food security.
Yeah.
The 3rd way pretty well. That's already convincing.
Yeah.
And the other one is convincing too. So I'm already convinced that your model for the first 2 ways works very well at predicting the 3rd wave.
Yeah.
7-day score. I'm wondering about the 30-day score, and you predict 70% good accuracy, sensitivity, all of that. Are some households left out?
Of course, and I think, yeah, that's part of the error of the prediction model, right? That I think we haven't explored it fully. That will be something that we probably get to it. Yeah, no, it's a great comment, it's a great question.
I'm not questioning the power of what you did. It's a very, very strong.
Yeah, I think that the focus, yeah, I mean, there is so much we can research about, right? I think that main focus was to see the change in recall period, right? Because another, what's we have seen in the literature is that there is a strong focus on finding the right predictors. Is it, you know, weather? Is it about, you know, household side that it's driving food insecurity? And that discussion hasn't ended, because every now and then people come with a new predictor that's not really the focus of our paper. What we just specifically nailing down is in the role of recall periods, because that's the inconsistency that we have observed, you know, in many different cases. All over presentations, you know, we use indicators. I'm not really sure if the ones here in the US use 7, 30 or 12 months. Yeah. Yeah, 12 months. and you have the food consumption score that is pretty popular. It's the mostly used and it's 7 days. So what are we measuring when we measure food security? We measure your short-term, long-term, and more importantly, all these programs of food assistance programs, why they should be tackling. They should be tackling, you know, food security measures that were at 7 days or 30 days, 12 days.
So one of the advantages here of very detailed geocode.
Yeah.
You can actually use weather data. How did you check how much including those, let's say, hard to get variables? Because for if we use the public access for public question survey, we have a ton of demographic characteristics, we have the distance, width, I mean, also, but the public access is not running on the level of geography.
Yeah, that's true.
So, omitting those variables, those weather variables, how strong are you try to see how much they contribute or?
I think we did. I didn't put it here in the presentation, but it's one of the main drivers because, you know, the weather variables within agriculture and what's mostly, you know, driving food security, it's agricultural production at the household level because most of them are smallholders. And the other situation I forgot to mention here is that irrigation services in Nigeria are almost non-existent. It's only 2% of the agricultural land that it's covered by irrigation services. So any shock on rains and on droughts cause a really serious situation in agricultural production in Nigeria.
I think that besides the strength of your method, you have a very inherent research question. If you just show how much like making predictions would actually be improved.
Yeah, it's as I was starting at the beginning, it's necessary because all these efforts in targeting and, you know, early warning systems, they are based on these assumptions, right? So I think it's important. And also, well, when we were writing this paper with CL, we didn't know why actually the World Bank changed this from 7 days to 30 days. We were, you know, just scratching our heads why the guys did this. And then, yeah, we've been in conversations with them until at the very end, they say, hey, yeah, you know, we want it to be, you know, in accordance with the FAO index or the FIS. And they were like, that's why we changed it. But that took us like 6 months to get that answer. Thank you. I think we're over. Yeah, 1 minute over.